Storytelling as a dungeon master is hard. It's probably the hardest part of DMing. After getting, 4 of your friends in a room at the same time once a week and then deciding what to order for food. So I wanted to dig into how some of the most famous DMs in the world tell amazing stories at their tables. And what I found surprised me. First up, let's talk about Chris Perkins, game architect at Wizards of the Coast and DM of Actual Play Acquisitions Incorporated. Chris's tip is to talk less, listen more, for 2 reasons. The first is, the more your players take initiative and interact with each other and you the DM, the more naturally invested into the world they will get. And 2, the more they talk, the more they spitball and try to figure out what's going on, the more ideas they will give you. It's like a free writer's room. The temptation as a DM is to think that you need to be talking 90% of the time. But what Chris Perkins thinks is that you can just give the bare minimum information and your players will either presume things or ask questions about things, and that's where you get them talking more. Matthew Mercer, who has some exceptional storytelling tricks that keep his players immersed in his world, it's why I call him Matthew Mercer. The first trick he has is that he uses all his senses to describe a scene, the environment he's in. He describes what something looks like, smells like, the sounds you can hear, the feel of the terrain underneath your feet, the moisture in the air, and so on and so on. And it's not just to make the players feel like they're really there. It's also to set the scene for what's to come. If Matt describes his players as entering a dark, uncomfortable, smelly place with the sound of something in a distance moving and crawling along the walls, the players are going to feel uneasy, and that's going to affect them and make them make different decisions compared to if Matt just said, okay, so you guys enter a cave. It would be like me saying that you hit the subscribe button, when I could say instead, you hear the click of the mouse echo around the room, and you feel a smile creep across your face as the subscribe button flashes multiple colours and settles into its new form, a grey unsubscribe button. But we don't talk about the unsubscribe button. Moving on, Matt also has the great trick of letting his players tell their stories first, before his own. If during session 0, or at any time really, you ask your players what story they are trying to tell with their characters, then you can set up moments that allow them to take the spotlight and tell their story. Then you can just sit back as a DM. I've mentioned this before as a tactic to get your players more comfortable role-playing, but it's also really healthy for the story as well, because characters drive stories. So by encouraging them to take initiative and try and tell their own story within the confines of your world, not only do you get to just become a bit more reactionary as a DM and watch the story unfold in front of you, but you can let your players take the reins and just gently steer them into a direction that is pushing the overall story forwards, the main story. And of course, talk to your players first about that. Not all players want to be telling their own story. Some of them do just want to be along for the ride and for the DM story, and that's fine too. I also want to take a moment to talk about Skillshare, sponsors of this video. If you want to learn new skills and be inspired, then Skillshare has thousands of online classes and a learning community full of members who all come together to move forward with their creative journeys, no matter what they may be. It is the largest online community for creatives that brings together teachers and members and a large option of topics, including illustration, graphic design, photography, productivity, and just so much more. If you're watching this video, you might especially be interested in videos about how to DM or build up the skills that are useful for DMs, such as storytelling, world building classes like this one, about designing a functional society, which will really help you understand the best way to make your world and its people realistic and unique. Or this class about old school dungeon map drawing, which teaches you how to draw dungeon maps, not just in a way that gets you great maps to use when you DM or give to your players as props, but it also shows you how to do it in a way that's enjoyable and therapeutic. But I've personally been interested in Skillshare for quite some time because DMing is a culmination of many different storytelling and organizational skills. So to have a platform where I can find and then develop these skills individually is amazing. And the first 500 people to click the link in the description can get 1 month free on Skillshare. So thanks so much Skillshare for sponsoring this video. And now let's get back to the Dungeon Masters. Damien Haas, DM of Sword AF, the Smosh D&D campaign, often subverts expectations, like in this example here, where the players come out of a tavern looking for a ride, and a centaur in front of a wagon looks like he's going to be the one who's going to pull them to their destination.
Y'all step outside of the bar, and you see this pretty long, sizable wagon. And standing in front of it is this very stern-looking centaur. So Gunthar does this huge whistle with his fingers, and around the bend comes a horse, which he then attaches to the front of the wagon. He then uses his hoofs to climb in the very front and lay like side saddle as he's about to drive.
What? I am so confused right now.
How are we gonna fit with his hooves?
Gunthar, you took me for a ride just now, bro.
Whoa, literally.
Damien, by making the players think one thing, then turning it on its head, does two things. The first is, it's funny. It gets a reaction out of the players and creates a memory. And the second thing is that it keeps the players on their toes, because the session becomes way less predictable, and the players are gonna constantly start questioning your world, pulling them into it way more. Okay, Brennan Lee Mulligan has a very satisfying long-term story trick, and that's to give each one of his characters a season arc. And I know what you're gonna say, Brennan isn't just DMing for his friends, he's DMing to an audience of hundreds of thousands of people. He's putting on a show, but like it or not, telling good stories to an audience of 1 million, kinda similar to telling a good story to you and your friends. Now, if you want to get pedantic with me about this stuff, it's what the comments are down there for, but that's what I genuinely believe. So when Brennan says he gives each character a season arc, he means he tends to hyper-focus on 1 or 2 characters at a time. So in one session, he's going to put the spotlight on Emily and Emily's character. The next session, he's going to explore Lou's character, and these stories may intertwine, but everyone has their own individual story that he's going to explore throughout the season. They get a beginning, middle, and an end. And sometimes to do that, Brennan does have to neglect the other characters a little bit. And it's fine to neglect certain people at the table sometimes, because the other people at the table know that at some point during this campaign, they're going to have the spotlight entirely on them. The temptation for a DM is to try and spread the spotlight out evenly, spread the attention out so that every session, everyone gets, great moments and development and all that stuff. But when you do that, you never really get a chance to go in actually deep into a character. You never really get to fully explore them. And of course, this won't work for all tables. Some players just do not like not having any attention on them for more than 2 minutes. But if this is something you really want to do, and something you will think will benefit your overall game, you can talk to your players about trying it, or discussing it in your next session 0. And when I say neglect certain characters so that other characters can shine, I don't mean neglect them completely. Give them something to do, give them a chance to, take part in fights, give them reasons to play the game in those sessions where their main story isn't the main story, but you've got to think of ways to bring them into another character's story. And while Brennan does spend entire scenes, entire sessions focusing on 1 or 2 particular characters, he does also merge storylines a lot, bringing in multiple aspects and goals of the players to the same place. So after focusing on individual characters and jumping between them, he has these epic finales where everything merges in the middle and the conclusion becomes a shared event, where the players' characters can really come together to accomplish their shared goal. Next up, we have Anthony Burch from the Dungeons and Daddies podcast. And full honesty here, I've listened to very little Dungeons and Daddies, but so many of you guys have told me to check it out in the comments and to check out Anthony Burch's DM style in particular, that I did some research into it, and it became very clear very quickly that Anthony tends to tell his stories impulsively. It's not that he doesn't plan a lot or prep a lot or put a lot of effort in, it's just that he's fine with it not going his way, and if his players come up with a great idea or a terrible idea, just an idea that they have to see what happens if this was the case, Anthony will change the story to match that. A quote I saw come up a few times was the, oh no, that's so stupid, now I have to do that. When one of Anthony's players comes up with just a really dumb idea and the whole group just can't not do it. Forget everything I planned, now this is happening. And this is obviously not for every DM, it's not for every table, but if you're fine with your players having a bigger input on your story, on your shared story than what they just have normally as a character, and you're comfortable improving and moving stuff around on the fly and just problem solving and fitting stuff together and making it work, then this can be a really, really rewarding way to play, because it's much more of a collaboration with the whole table than just everyone listening to what the DM's saying. And you as the Dungeon Master kind of get to watch the story unfold with the players rather than for the players, because you don't know what's going to happen next. But the downside of this, and it's a big downside, is that if you don't trust your players and you're not very comfortable with shaking things up like this on the fly while still trying to keep control, then things can spiral very fast. There's too many cooks in the kitchen, everyone is shouting out their ideas, they want you to do this or that, and that's just not good for the story. So if you did want to adopt some of this style, I would say do it sparingly. But the biggest tip for this entire video is that for the majority of DMs, at the majority of tables, great storytelling happens before the game. Preparation, preparation, preparation. Just know your players are probably going to foil your plans, and then it's about moving things around and improvising, then prepping again. But don't over prep. And to learn exactly how to get the right balance for this, check out this video next.